do real good in preschool.
I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Roll call.
Mayor Yanish.
Here.
Councilmember Reese.
Here.
Christensen.
Here.
Anderson.
Here.
Amon.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Dockin.
Here.
Fagerly.
Here.
DeBleek.
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Could we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Frank. Open. You got 2 people. Oh, I think you can keep it.
Item 4 on the agenda. Are there any proposed additions or deletions to the agenda? If not seeing any, I have several. The first one would be the on letter F on the on the consent items. It says mayoral reappointment of Susan Steinhardt. It is an appointment. It is not a reappointment. And also, I would like to make the appointment of Councilman Dockin as a liaison to the Airport Commission. Under miscellany, there's a couple of corrections that Kevin will address, or a correction on the work session. And then on the videotaping, I would like the council discussion on the videotaping and the committee meetings. And then I'd like to say a few words about the railroad incident that we experienced this past week. That being said, we move to the consent items to approve or accept.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the consent items. Do I need to read those, Kevin?
Your choice.
Okay. Are there any items, though there are no items that have been removed?
I'd like to talk about item F.
Item F, okay. And that would be put under, oh, we pull that now, am I right? Okay.
Just a question, Mr. Mayor. I see Susan is not a citizen of Willmar. She does not live in Willmar. Is that correct?
And that probably is correct, but I understand that it's a different situation with the
Convention and Visitors Bureau has different criteria. Certainly, a number of them are from Spicer, and which has a tax and remits some of that tax to us. And then there's representation from hotels that has different criteria.
Okay. There's not a criteria that we have a certain number of Willmar residents on that board?
That is not a numerical criteria. I'm sure it's near 90% of the representatives right now, but there's no numerical criteria for that.
Okay.
So now, do we have to have another motion on that?
Standard motion, no. Just a standard motion. It's not pulled at this time. It's before the calling of the motion.
Okay. So do we have a motion?
Yeah, you do already.
Yeah, already.
Okay, second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We have 2 scheduled public hearings for this evening. One is the ordinance authorizing the issuance of hospital revenue notes. And that being said, I will open the hearing for that. Is there someone here to speak to that?
Yeah, we have Kathy Aho here from
Kathy
Springstead.
Aho, okay.
Mr. Mayor, council members, good evening. There's a copy of the presentation material that was put on your desks before the meeting. And Mr. Fensky from the hospital is here also in the event that you have questions that are more appropriately addressed to him. The action requested this evening is that you approve the issuance of $3 million in a hospital revenue note to fund an approximate 16,000 square foot addition to Rice Care Center and renovation of existing rooms in the center. Thank you. A little bit about the proposed issuance itself. Again, $3 million. The financing will be tax exempt. It'll be amortized over a 30-year term. Interest will be paid semi-annually. Principal will be paid annually and in such a fashion to provide for level debt service over that 30-year period. The interest rates for the financing were determined through an RFP process. All of the local banks were asked to participate. They responded as a single syndicate and proposed an initial rate of 4.25% with 5-year interest rate resets at the 5-year constant maturity treasury plus 3%. This financing is prepayable at any time without penalty. And this slide just summarizes the banks that are involved and their proportionate share of the transaction. These notes will be what we call parity debt, and anything that's issued as parity debt must meet certain rules. It will have the first claim on the revenues of the hospital, the net revenues, so after operations. And this particular financing will have an equal claim on those revenues with two other financings, a 1994C issue, which will mature in 2015, and then the large 2002 general obligation-backed issue that was sold and matures in 2036. Any other debt that the hospital issues is subordinate to this unless they specifically issue that as parity debt also. And there are certain tests that have to be passed in order to issue parity debt. Some of the major covenants are the two that are listed here. The annual net revenues for the most recent 2 years have to provide at least 1.25 times maximum annual debt service on all parity bonds. So for every dollar of debt service, the net revenues have to equal at least $1.25. And there's also a debt service reserve requirement that the hospital have in a specifically maintained cash reserve enough money to cover the maximum annual debt service of the combined parity debt. So that is a reserve that I believe is held here at the city. Just to show you a picture of the existing parity debt, you can see that little blue spot on the bottom is a smaller 1994 issue that matures in 2015, and combined those two issues are about $3.5 million of debt service per year. This note, I apologize, let me just look this up so I tell you the right number. The principal and interest on this note is projected at about $170,000 to $180,000, and you can see that its level debt service, it's going to be right along with the existing $3.5 million that's up there, and then as that is paid off, the debt service will drop as you see there. In terms of compliance with the parity bond coverage, or covenants, the first one that I mentioned, the 1.25 times maximum annual debt service coverage, the coverage that we're projecting with this financing will actually be 1.99 times based on the 2008 revenue figures and 2.18 times using the 2009 revenue figures, so quite a bit higher than what's required by the covenant. The debt service reserve will need to be increased, and that will be done as a result of the financing. Some of the proceeds will be used to fill up that reserve. Because this is priced off of the 5-year constant maturity treasury index, I thought that you might enjoy seeing where that has been since 1991, the last 20 years. You can see that it's been at quite a lower rate in the last half of that time period than at the beginning. Key events in the process: we met on the 31st with the Finance Committee and presented a little more detail on the financings. This evening is a public hearing on the issuance of the notes, and again, we're asking your approval to issue them. And February 9th, the hospital board will be approving the note sale. On March 7th, there'll be consideration and the actual sale of the notes by the council. So this will come back to you on the 7th. And then on March 8th, we would close with the banks and they would deliver funds. If you have any questions on the financings, I'd be happy to try to answer them. And as I mentioned, Mr. Fensky is also here this evening.
Are there any questions here? Bill, do you have something to add, or would you like to come up to the podium? I have a question for you if you have. Are there any questions from the council?
Is the hearing closed, or?
No.
Depends if you want comment from him in the official hearing, otherwise.
Well, I would like to have a comment from. I've heard about the moratoriums on new rooms being built. What can you tell me about that? Because I understand that there are 23 new rooms being built here.
Yeah, the moratorium is that every skilled nursing facility is licensed for so many beds, and you cannot exceed that licensed bed capacity. With the 23 new rooms that are being built, we are still staying within the licensed capacity. What we're really doing is ending up taking many semi-private rooms and making them private rooms. So we'll still have the same 78-bed licensed capacity.
That's your license for it.
Yep.
Is there any public comment at all? Question? Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. At this time, we'll close the public hearing. Any discussion? Councilman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move approval of the debt of the bonds.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to approve the sale of the bonds.
We'll adopt the ordinance, give it a number, and publish it.
Okay. And then this is a roll call.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Amman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Dockin.
Aye.
Beggerly.
Aye.
DeBleek.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
The motion carries. At this time, we will open the hearing on the authorizing the issuance of municipal utility revenue bonds for the municipal utilities. Is there anyone to speak to that? Kathy Aho?
Aho. Mr. Mayor, council members, just a second for the slides to come up. Again, you have a handout on this that covers the presentation material as well. The action requested this evening is to approve the issuance of $1.75 million in bonds for planned reimbursement of a portion of the costs incurred by the utility in the construction of wind turbines 3 and 4 and the treatment plant substation. And again, in either case, that's just a portion of the costs that have been covered by utility cash. The proposed issuance here is a little more complicated. We would have a first issue of $805,000 for taxable new clean renewable energy bonds, $945,000 of tax-exempt bonds, and those amounts may switch slightly between one another, but would not exceed $1.7 million in aggregate. The term is approximately 17 years in aggregate, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Interest is paid semi-annually, and principal is required to be paid on July 1st for this transaction. The final interest rates would be determined through negotiation with a broker-dealer, We do have a request for proposals out on the street. That is the same process that we used with the utilities issue that was sold in 2009. We did get 3 responses today, so we'll be discussing those with the city and utility staff tomorrow. These bonds will also be issued as parity bonds, but utility revenue parity bonds. Again, they will have an equal claim to utility revenues with any other parity debt, and we've issued listed the 3 issues that are currently outstanding that are parity issues: a 1999B issue and 2001B issue, which mature in July of this year, and a 2009A issue that matures in 2025. There is a subordinate bond issue, which is a 2005B general obligation of the city that is being paid by water revenues. Again, parity bonds can only be issued if certain tests are met, and the tests are similar to those of the hospital. They're spelled out in the prior bond resolutions. And in this case, annual net revenues, that would be after operations, have to provide at least 1.25 times the average annual debt service on all parity debt. The average net revenues must also provide for 100% of the maximum annual debt service on any debt. And again, a debt service reserve must be funded equal to a combined maximum annual debt service for all issues. We have a few more colors on this graph. The existing debt service, you can see the 2 issues that mature this year down at the bottom in blue and red. The green block is the issue that was sold in 2009, and that issue funded the predominance of the wind turbine costs. And then up on the top in purple is that small water, general obligation water revenue transaction. As I mentioned, there are 2 issues that are proposed: a Krebs issue, new Krebs, clean renewable energy bonds, and a tax-exempt issue. This chart lays out the sources and uses. There will be $1,750,000 sold. There will be some cash that the utility has to provide. Not all of the costs here are able to be covered by the bond issues. The clean renewable energy bonds cannot be used to fund a reserve. There's also a federal limitation on how many proceeds can come out of a tax-exempt bond issue to fund a reserve. So most of the funds that you see here being added as equity will go into that reserve account to make sure that we have that at the required level. There will be about $1,550,000 that goes in to reimburse the expenditures that have been made to date. $169,000 is our estimate of what will be needed to go into the debt service reserve fund. Some costs of issuance and underwriting discount, and based on some work that we did just today, I believe that will come in lower on both of those numbers. So after the issuance of these bonds, you can see the blue section is the additional debt that's added on. And what we're trying to do with both of those transactions is work them together so that they wrap around the new transaction. The tax-exempt issue we scheduled out over 20 years, but then we've ballooned those last years so that, pardon me, in 2025, I believe it is, the general obligation, or excuse me, the 2009 utility revenue bond matures, and so anything that would otherwise be remaining outstanding on the tax-exempt is scheduled to mature that year. It's in the neighborhood of between $400,000 and $500,000. In terms of compliance with parity bond covenants, the first was that annual net revenues provide at least 1.25 times the average annual debt service, and we're projecting that that coverage will actually be at 5.69 times. The second requirement, that annual net revenues provide at least 100% of maximum annual debt service on the debt, and we're projecting that that will be 4.75 times. And again, that a debt service reserve equal to combined maximum annual debt service is funded, and that will be done again at closing. I included 2 charts that show where the market is, what it's been doing. You can see this first one, the red line is what we call the bond buyer's index. This is the one we usually show you for your general obligation bonds. It shows the yield in the 20th year for high-rated general obligation bonds. The dashed blue line is for high-grade revenue bonds out in the 25th year. So it's not going to be directly comparable, but it gives you an idea of where the market has been. There's been a big ramp up in rates at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. There's been a little moderation of that just in the last week or two, and otherwise the market's very stable. You can see historically it's not at the high point, but it has climbed up from the historic lows that we experienced in the prior year. This chart will relate to the B issue, the tax-exempt bond issue. And this second chart relates to the clean renewable energy bonds. As I mentioned, those are taxable bonds, and they'll follow the taxable market. There'll be a spread over taxable. And this is where that taxable market has been for a 3-month, 1-year, and 10-year Treasury. There are a couple of things that I should probably point out about the clean renewable energy bonds. Those bonds can only be issued with an allocation from the federal government. They're issued as taxable bonds, but the utility will receive a credit equal to 70% of the actual interest that you incur, or 70% of interest at a federal rate that's determined, whichever is less. With the indications that we've got on interest rates, I think we'll be close, maybe a little bit over that federal rate. So probably somewhere between 65 and 70% of the interest on this transaction will be paid through that credit. As a result, the interest expense on that piece of the financing is probably going to be in the neighborhood of $200,000 less than it would be if we sold it as a tax-exempt issue. So that's why we're using the CREB transaction, and so if you were wondering why we're selling taxable bonds, it's because of that credit that they're able to receive. Again, if you have any questions, well, pardon me, the key events here are very similar to those that we looked at for the hospital. One of the key differences is that in order to do the clean renewable energy bond, we do need to have that issue closed by March 6th. We have asked then in this transaction, not in the hospital transaction, but in this one, that we are able to come back to the council on the 22nd. This is a little different than what I had told the Finance Committee. We thought we were going to be taking that action this evening, but we'll be coming back on the 27th to pass what is called a parameters resolution that will establish a pricing committee that will actually complete the transaction with the underwriter so we can meet that March 3rd date. And with that, then, I would stand for any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any questions for Ms. Aho? Yes. Please come up.
David Herzer from Country Club Drive. Could you clarify for me just one question? With the level debt service that will exist, will that completely create a sinking fund adequate to retire the $8,100,000 worth of bonds issued in 2009, as well as this new issue? Or will there be a balloon left that we will have our future generations pay for on the wind turbine project? And is my question clear?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I ask that this slide be returned to the screen. Actually, the two issues, both the clean renewable energy bonds and the tax-exempt bonds, have a balloon payment. The clean renewable energy bonds require that there be a deposit each year so that when you get out to the final maturity, you have the money in hand to pay that balloon. On the tax-exempt issue, we've scheduled that balloon just after all of the other debt matures, and so it's actually a reduction in debt service of about $500,000 in the final maturity of the tax-exempt. So the specific question was asked is if this pattern of debt service that you see here running just over $1 million and then dropping down just under $1 million, and it will drop to even farther in that final year when there's only that one tax-exempt issue, that will be sufficient to retire all of the parity bond issues of the utility. So there'll be no debt outstanding at that point in time.
Thank you. Did that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Gom, did you have something to add? Do we have any questions for Mr. Gom?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Bruce. Regarding the turbines that you're proposing at the waste treatment plant, I understand?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
The waste treatment plant turbines that you're, for this whole project that you're talking about? Can you explain more of that?
The funding that we're talking about is for the 2 wind turbines that we erected at the high school site, and then also there's funding for the substation that we built out at the waste treatment plant for the new waste treatment site.
Did that answer the questions?
Yeah, I thought there was... No, that's fine. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other questions, public? Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
With that, we will close the public hearing if there are no other questions. Or public hearing is closed. And what would the council wish to do? Councilman Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move to adopt the ordinance, give it a number, and publish it.
Second.
The move has been made and seconded to
Adopt the ordinance.
Adopt the ordinance.
Give it a number and publish.
Give it a number and publish it. Oh, this is roll call.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Christensen.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Amon.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Dockin.
Aye.
Baggerly.
Aye.
DeBleek.
Aye.
Reese.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
The motion carries. The ordinance will be given a number and adopted and published. Now we move to the open forum part of our council meeting, and we have a number of Daniel Ruthis. Would you like to speak? Please come up to the podium.
Good evening. I was here back in November, and I had that issue about the land taking, and it really wasn't resolved. And I'm hoping to make another attempt at it. I got some handouts. Here.
Can we have someone pass those on? Yes, sir.
And packets. Just these are all one and a map. There's 2 different ones. Yep.
Is there enough for everybody?
Okay. Now everybody's got a map. Now I'll refresh the land that we used to own is that L shape that's colored, and the city's taking was the blue. So what we got left is the 2 yellow pieces on both sides. And basically we had 120 acres there, and now and they took about 70 in the middle there. But we got these odd shaped pieces on both sides. So, I mean, the remnants aren't worth as much as they were when the whole piece was there, but my point is the biggest point I was going to do is last November when I was in here, Kevin Holliday mentioned that this land was no longer going to be, there was no specified use for it, since it was supposed to be built for the road, but nobody's, there's not a specified use still. And the reason I got your eminent domain laws, I want you to look on page 9. And if you look on section 15 at the bottom there, first right of refusal, it says if a governing body of a condemning authority determines that the publicly owned land required under this chapter has no longer been used or is no longer needed for public use, the authority must offer to sell the property to the owner to whom it was required. That's written in the law there. And see, what I'm trying to do is get that land lease in my name, since see, they had sealed bids, and I wrote my bid on the wrong form, and I didn't get this. I didn't have a bid on it. And I know of other property that's been sold, and when they sold, they rewrote their lease. So what my proposal is that if we could write up a bill of sale pending approval from the FFA, if we can get their lease back into my name.
Okay, that's the total of your request right now?
Proposal. Or else, I mean, basically, yeah, that's basically my...
I'd call in our city attorney, what the city should do at this point.
I don't fully understand his proposal. The first part of his proposal was that the city issue a bill of sale. The second part of the proposal was that they rent the property to him. I don't really understand what Mr. Grotus is saying.
Okay, what I'm saying is that I wasn't able to I wasn't able to sublease it, and I'm proposing that I would like to, since we were former owners, and I guess you'll have to read the, these are the laws that I took over the internet. You'll have to read them and look under first right of refusal.
I'm familiar with the right of first refusal provision in the eminent domain law, but it's not my understanding that the city no longer has a use for it. Is that correct, Kevin? The city does still have to own that property?
I'll defer the technicality of the extended runway to Mr. Bruce Peterson if he'd enjoy taking the microphone over. But that is what this parcel is for, an extension of the runway.
Yes.
Future extension of the runway.
Future. Distant future.
Right.
And see, when I was here last November, Kevin Holliday stated that there was no immediate use at that time.
Okay, I think rather than get into a discussion of that this evening, would it be proper to get a city attorney's opinion on this after he sees this?
Sure.
And Can we do that and say get back to you within a short period of time?
Refer it to community development.
Refer it to community development? We will do that. We'll get the city attorney involved in it, and we'll refer it to community development committee, and someone, possibly the chairman, would be back in touch with you at that point.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just as a point of reference here, the Finance Committee dealt with that last fall. This very same issue we dealt with last fall. So it might be better to bring it back to Finance. We have the history on this one.
Good idea.
Should we do that? Bring it back to Finance?
Council discretion.
Finance issue.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll bring it back to the Finance Committee. Thank you very much. Thank you. We also have a Nancy Street, am I saying that right? Street? State your name and address.
Nancy Streety, and my business address is 112 Lake Avenue Northwest. I'm a Penna resident. What I'm asking Councilmember Dockin after the community development meeting asked me to be here because it was brought up on a letter that I had written to the council members about our tax exempt application and some other issues that I have. And that's really not why I'm here to speak, because First Step has been 501c3 since 2001, and that's a misconception with the city. And that's not what the issue is. We've submitted our property tax thing, and it's been denied, and the date for appeal is passed for that, but I have resubmitted it for 2011, so we'll see how that year goes. And hopefully it will be approved, or we will be appealing it on the state level. The only reason I'm here is to discuss, I wrote a letter to all of you back, well, in January, and I've called to the city and asked them questions concerning tax exemptions, tax abatements, and some other questions, and I've never gotten any answers. I've left messages. My letter I wrote in January, Councilman Amon was the only one that did reply to me, but he still could not answer any of my questions. And I would just like to take that point is that if somebody has asked a question concerning something, it would be nice to get a reply. And the only other time when I've made comments, like every time it rains, our business gets flooded out. And the only time I've gotten any kind of reaction from anybody in the city is when I called and woke the mayor up at 6:30 in the morning and complained. So my thing is, why do I have to complain to get a response? That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Nancy. Councilman Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I know we're not supposed to discuss this, but I had spoken to our city administrator about this, week and a half ago, or and he stated that he has had conversations with Ms. Streety, and that we legally can't do anything presently. I suggest maybe the city attorney can address this in one of our committee meetings and tell us exactly what the scoop is on 501c3 and her not being able to get a tax-exempt status. That's my suggestion.
I think this young lady does deserve an answer, and so can we bring this back, hopefully with the city attorney, to the community development meeting? Is that where it was at?
I would ask, Mr. Mayor, if that's the appropriate committee. I'd be happy to have it at community development. Bruce, do you think that's where it belongs?
Mayor Yanish, Councilmember Dock, and members of the council, the issues appear to be rather disparate. You're talking about financial issues on one hand and a public works drainage issue on the other hand. So Whereas our committee can certainly be the sounding board for these issues, they are probably two separate issues that would be better separated into the Finance Committee and to Public Works.
If I may address, Bruce, would it be best to have the city attorney at that meeting or meetings to get the legal status of that?
Well, I think how it's handled is really at the discretion of the council. You can request any and all staff to appear and provide whatever information you want.
Well, we still don't know which committee is going to handle it.
Oh, I'd follow Mr. Peterson's recommendation. If the Public Works, Public Safety Committee should look at the drainage concerns, but we do have answers for that. And the Finance Committee probably should take a look at this other issue, but our assessor would be there. And it's probably more in her hands, in her conversations with the Department of Revenue, than our city attorney. Those are the two committees, my recommendation.
Okay. So we start with that?
Sure.
Okay. Do we need any type of a motion, or was that for information only?
Direct to staff.
Okay. We're good. Are there any other people that would like to speak at the public open forum? If not, we will close that part of our meeting, and we'll get the Public Works Committee report from Councilman Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first item on the agenda was in regards to land development for our new wastewater treatment facility, and part of the process is to look at the wetlands and the wetlands replacement. And the wetlands that were established to replace those that were taken for the construction have recently been inspected and accepted by the county, and it's necessary to have the new wetlands area filed with the county recorder's office. So I would introduce a motion to adopt the declaration and have it recorded with the county, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to adopt the declaration and have it recorded with the county. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
The next item was the discussion that we've had in the past and some of the contacts that we've had with the school district in regards to the Garfield property and the possible interest on the side of the city. And if you recall, Ingen and Associates were retained, and they conducted a feasibility report for the Garfield school facility, and Richard Ingen from Ingen and Associates was at our meeting and reviewed the feasibility study with the committee. The building was identified to be a well-built structure that has been well-maintained over 72 years. And the report was based on the building being converted from a school to an office building by modifying any existing systems that are beyond their life expectancy. The layout of the classrooms provides modules of space that are easy to convert to offices. The overall concrete building structure is in very good condition. However, it may require some tuck pointing and repair work. The windows are lower performance and would typically need replacement. On the interior, most finishes are in good, durable condition. There's a fire alarm system and lower level sprinkling system in place. An elevator would need to be installed in the building, and the plumbing and heating systems are original and beyond useful life, and a cooling system for the offices would be necessary. Mr. Ingen stated it appears that Garfield School could be converted to an office building for approximately 2/3 the cost of a similar new office building, and he reviewed the cost comparison with the committee. The current zoning for the school is residential 2, R2, and which allows for schools or other public buildings. If a private developer were interested in the building for a housing program, it would be necessary to be rezoned. The committee acknowledged the need for a response to the school district and thanked Mr. Ingen for his report. After that, I talked to Mick, well, in the meeting, and he was going to have us a square foot comparison. Do we have that? Between our existing city offices and the Garfield School, because the thought was that they were very close, very similar in the same size.
We don't have those comparisons tonight.
Well, how soon do we have to respond to the school on this? Do you have any idea?
Well, there's not a exact timetable. Their hopes were to transfer that property to us and pay less or nothing on the Roosevelt parking lot.
Right.
So the swap is pending every payment to the county, May 15th and October 15th. And the sooner it was taken care of, the less they would pay at those certain timelines.
Can we put a timeline on that for a response?
Well, I think it's just going to continue to come back until it's resolved and the council makes a final decision on where they can make that decision based on yardage, square footage rather, or anything else. And until that time, I guess it's just a slow exploration.
I think rather than have the discussion here, I'd like to see that comparison and have it come back to Public Works, Public Safety again for some further discussion on the committee level. All right.
And when might that take place? I mean...
next Tuesday.
Next? Can we have it by then? The information?
I believe we can make that deadline.
Okay.
Okay. The next item was the improvement report for 2011. And Holly outlined the residential streets to be reconstructed with a total of a little over 1.5 miles. And that included the overlay of Becker Avenue Southeast, also water main replacement on that same stretch of street, 7th Street Southwest for the 1.53 miles, a street lighting project, and then some miscellaneous items. The overlay of 7th Street Southwest is in conjunction with Candioi County, and it is the section where the water main was installed last year. The miscellaneous work is the continuing rehabilitation of the deck of the First Street Bridge, some stormwater improvements at 15th Avenue Southwest, east of 22nd Street by raising the roadway to assist in alleviating street flooding, and the installation of a walk path connection on 22nd Street Southwest, and crack seal and seal coat. The total estimated cost is $2,686,830. And I would introduce a resolution to accept that improvement report and order an improvement hearing for 7:02 p.m. February 22nd, 2011.
Second.
Resolution has been made and seconded to accept the improvement report and order an improvement hearing for 7:02 on February 22nd of this year. That would be a roll call.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Amon.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Dockin.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
DeBleek.
Aye.
Reese.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That passes.
Next was a general allowance for project 1017B. It'd be the allowance number 2, which was brought to us by Rhonda Ray from Donahue and Associates, and this is in regards to the decommissioning of our former wastewater treatment plant. The allowance has 4 items in the administration building, including relocation of unit heater to meet ADA requirements, relocation of plumbing vents, and changing rooms where floor modifications will take place, and patching of existing holes where blocks were missing. The net amount general allowance is $127.08. I would introduce the resolution for that general allowance number 2.
Second.
The resolution has been introduced and seconded to approve the general allowance number 2 for project number 1017B in the amount of $127.08 and authorize the city administrator to execute on behalf of the city of Willmar. Roll call.
Councilmember Amon.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Dockin.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
DeBleek.
Aye.
Reese.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
Resolution passes.
Ms. Ray then presented change order number 7 to project 812C in the amount of $40,438.36. During startup and commissioning of our new wastewater treatment facility, several items were discovered that required corrective action, and she explained the items to the committee. I would introduce a resolution to approve that change order number 7 for 812C and authorize the city administrator to execute it on behalf of the city.
Second.
Resolution has been introduced and seconded to approve the change order number 7 for the project number 0812C and authorize the city administrator to execute on behalf of the city. Roll call.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Dockin.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
Bleak.
Aye.
Reese.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Amon.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
And the resolution passes.
Then Donahue and Associates is requesting that the engineering services agreement between them and the city be revised to reflect additional fees associated with the survey, wetland delineation, and, design of 3 future service areas for expansion of the Western Interceptor sewer. The amount to be added to the current contract for revisions is $3,380. And I would introduce a motion, or a resolution, I'm sorry, to authorize the mayor, city administrator to sign an amendment to the agreement with Donahue and Associates for engineering services related to the Western Interceptor and revise the budget allocations accordingly.
Second.
The resolution has been made and seconded to authorize the mayor and city administrator to sign an amendment to the agreement with Donahue and Associates for engineering services related to the Western Interceptor and revise the budget allocations accordingly. Roll call.
Councilmember Dockin.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
DeBleek.
Aye.
Reese.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Amon.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
And the resolution carries.
And Rhonda Ray from Donahue reviewed with the committee activities for the month of December on our wastewater treatment plant relocation project. Program management activities included submittal of pay request number 15 for the 30-year loan to the PFA for Clean Water Revolving Fund, and pay request number 15 to the PFA for ARA funds. The firm continues to provide information for the city's asset management, maintenance, and operational program. Work continues on gravity collection, piping, and force main piping costs. Donahue is assisting legal counsel and city staff to provide information on the property acquisition for the Western Collector and lift station decommissioning projects. Projects 813D3, 814D4, 816D6 are substantially complete. The contractors are currently working on punch list items. Project 815D5 was approved for final project acceptance and final payment in September of last year. and the contractor continues to work on punch list items from startup for 812C and completion of final copy of the operations manuals. The contractor for 1017B is progressing, and the contractor has installed temporary heating, ventilating, air conditioning, and completed the gas line relocation. The fiberglass covers from the RBCs were hauled out, and most of the administration building is demolished. Demolition was started for structure 150 excess flow basins. The project is slated for completion in 2011. That was for information only. The next was also some information from Donahue and Associates. A public hearing is necessary to receive comments and input on the facilities plan for the Western Interceptor project. So I would introduce a resolution to set a public hearing for that facilities plan for 7:03 p.m. on February 22nd, 2011.
Second.
The resolution has been introduced and seconded to set a public hearing for the facilities plan for the Western Interceptor Sewer Project at 7:03 p.m. on February 22nd, 2011. Roll call, please.
Question?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I've been questioning the project. Did the committee talk in quite length as to the positive feedback as to the reasons why we need the Western Interceptor put in at this time?
Why we need it?
Yeah.
I don't know. Bruce, do you want to address that? Maybe you're probably the best one to address that, I would say.
Mayor Yanish, Councilmember Reese, Councilmember Amon, members of the council. That's a really good question, and we had a brief discussion of that at our Community Development Committee meeting last week, and the committee asked me to put together a brief position paper from a development standpoint for our meeting of next week, the 17th, to offer my comments as to why I think the timing is proper to do it now. And in a nutshell, it's being optimistic about the land release. I'd like to have this Western Sewer Interceptor in place so that we can market property as developable, and we are not trying to sell property and then telling the people that want to purchase a property that, you know, you're going to have to wait because it doesn't have sewer yet. We've already got portions of the existing platted industrial park, parts of the old airport that cannot be served with the existing sewer. So our supply of industrial land that's serviceable by municipal sewer out in the industrial park area is extremely limited, and we need to get ahead of that game.
Thank you. Does that answer it for you, Steve?
Well, yes, no. I just hope at the hearing that we can get more information on it. Based on Holly, I talked to you prior to the meeting. I wonder if you could maybe, just for the sake of public information, find out, you know, the difficulties we have, or what the capacity is, what the maximum load is on that line right now, and where we're going to be going with potential development out there. I hate to put all that infrastructure in and have it sit there for 10 years and nothing happen at the new site. And with the FAA holding us back on the industrial side, I just wonder if it's really a smart move to move ahead of it right now. And I'd like to be, convince me, please convince me with some information and the public, so I don't have to talk to them too long after at coffee. I don't mind doing that. But right now it's a tremendously big project for something that right now our existing system is working. And to put the infrastructure in, I know we have to plan ahead, but at what expense? And I like that defined. And what the cost of us to have an infrastructure put in, let's say for 5 years with nothing being done at the airport or at the new industrial site, and no development put out there, what that's costing the taxpayers. So there's a fine line between what we're going to be spending and what our payback is going to be. I know we're trying to do this for the development of jobs and for industry in this community. I'm not opposed to that at all. I'm just questioning the amount of the project right now and the need for it right at this time. So if staff could direct that information to us, I'd really appreciate it at the hearing. Thank you.
If I may expand on what Councilman Amon was saying, Mr. Peterson, is there any other reasons why that would go in now as compared to later?
I would hope to have some additional reasoning in the paper that I will put together for the committee. Right offhand, you know, it's been, from my perspective, it's been purely to address the shortage of developable industrial space. And again, in my opinion, I think that's reason enough to proceed at this time. Infrastructure should not follow development or be expected to follow development. Development will follow infrastructure. Is there a gamble on the part of the city? Yes. Is there a bigger risk if you don't do it? In my opinion, yes.
Christensen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Isn't it true also, Bruce, that, I mean, the local option sales tax is going to be paying for the part in the industrial park? It's a smaller share, but it will be paying for that, correct?
It's my understanding that local option sales tax monies are part of the funding scheme for the Western Interceptor, yes.
Then timing is part of it, too. We can wait and put it in later if we think development's going to occur later, but right now there's price is right on excavating and putting in this interceptor. I mean, people are looking for work and the bids are low, and might be a good time to be doing this. But I'll wait the paper for Mr. Peterson to make a decision.
We got a motion for the resolution in a second.
Yes, sir.
And to set a public hearing for the facilities, whoops, where am I at?
Yes.
That's right. That's right. To set a public hearing for the facilities plan for the Western Interceptor Sewer Project for 703 on February 22nd, 2011. Roll call.
Councilmember Fagerly.
Aye.
DeBleek.
Aye.
Reese.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Amon.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Dockin.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
Resolution carries.
Our fire department is looking to apply for 2010 fire prevention safety grant through FEMA, and the funds, if they are received, would be used for stovetop fire stops and deaf and hard of hearing smoke fire alarms that would be dispersed throughout our community. It'll take a 5% match from the city, and that would be funded from the fire department's budget. So I would introduce a resolution to grant permission to the fire department for the application, acceptance, and expenditure of that 2010 fire prevention safety grant.
Second.
The resolution has been made and seconded to grant permission to the fire department for the application, acceptance, and expenditure of the 2010 fire prevention and safety grant funds. Roll call.
Councilmember DeBleek.
Aye.
Reese.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Amon.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Dockin.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
The last item was just a miscellaneous item, where our police chief, Mr. Weifels, commented on the community-oriented policing program meetings. And as we all know, they've been combined for all wards to once a month at the fire station. And he was just informing us that last month there were no members of the public present. The next COPS meeting was February 1st. So that's the extent of the minutes. If there's any questions, we'll try and answer them beyond that.
Good question.
I'm sorry. Mr. Fagerly?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since we had the COPS meeting the other day, how many attended that one?
Councilmember Fagerly, members of the council, mayor. Unfortunately, we didn't have the meeting that Councilmember Reese just announced. That was the night that everything had been canceled. The temperatures were below zero, and we put out a public radio announcement that the meeting had been canceled due to that reason. The meeting before, we had nobody present, And we felt that we were putting people in danger by holding a meeting that night when everything else had been canceled. So to answer your question, it was 0 again.
So the next meeting will be in March then?
The next meeting will be the first Tuesday in March.
Okay, thank you.
Well, just comment, I got a call from constituents. There was that brave that cold evening and went out there. There was no sign on the door, and the place was locked up tighter than a drum. And they were a little disappointed because they read it on the website. And of course, things happen. But they were able to venture out in town without any problem. I'm just wondering in the future that to allow this, that it doesn't happen, that at least we have something posted if we're going to be canceling a meeting at the doors, so people aren't waiting there for 15, 20 minutes. And
I would acknowledge that. I know of 4 people, it was brought to my attention, that had come to the meeting and did not find a sign on the door. I would say that we were remiss and negligent in not doing that. We should have. It just wasn't thought of. It was put on the radio and on the website, but we missed that, and that would have been a nice gesture. So if somebody had shown up at the door, they would have known that. And you can bet we learned, and that won't happen again.
You got to love this weather, don't we?
It is what it is.
Okay, do we need a motion?
Need a second to it. Yeah.
Motion and a second?
Don't have a second. He made a motion to file the minutes. Okay, there we go.
It's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries. Labor Relations Committee report for January 26th. Councilman Ahman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. We met on Wednesday, January 26th, City Office Building. Item number 1 as the editor was Mr. Herzer was present, David Herzer, and he asked me prior to the Labor Relations Committee that he wanted to address this, so I asked him to be there. And that is included in your packet, as I'm sure you've all read. Mick Schmidt initiated a discussion of current employee vacancies and a follow-up request to fill one of the 2 vacant maintenance positions. A total of 16 positions remain vacant, including 8 paid on-call firefighters, 2 police officers, 1 engineer, a person in an assessing department, 1 at the airport, and a public works employee that recently left. The city's workforce consists of 104 employees, a net increase of 3 over 1991, so to now a total of 101 employees. We had considerable discussion involving the need for a full-time maintenance position and the council's position of the hiring freeze currently in place. It was a consensus the committee continue to continue the freeze and explore in greater detail the option of using part-time, non-salaried employees. There was a motion on the floor, and it's not stated in the minutes. There was a motion made by one of the council members. It was not seconded. So at this case, it was referred back to committee again after Mick was going to do some more research on that. And just for a point of comment, I asked Mick to bring some information if the bids that we did receive from the other suppliers or contractors that we're going to look at doing some of the work, if their fees included the cleaning materials, the equipment, chemicals, whatever else is needed. It wasn't specified at the meeting. I think he failed to bring that information to us, so that should be included when we bring it back to committee. That was for information. There is no action taken. Item number 2 is we announced the intent of the committee to close the minutes, or to close the meeting to discuss employment contract negotiations with various collective bargaining groups. The motion was closed at 5:30. Meeting was closed at 5:30, and then we opened it up again. And there being no further business, we move to adjourn. And I would move to file the minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Unless there's any questions.
Second. Motion has been made and seconded to file the minutes of the Labor Relations Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sorry.
Oh,
more discussion?
But we did have a motion to replace the 1 custodian.
We had a motion, but it was not seconded.
But not seconded.
And there was not a vote.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. The Finance Committee report for July 31st, Councilman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first two items, well, the first item was public forum. I should acknowledge that Laura Becker was there and expressed her thanks to the council for the Willmar Watershed Management Report that had recently been completed and presented. The next two items we've already acted on. It has to do with the utilities and the Rice Care Center financing, the bonds that we approved tonight, and this was just a summary of what we heard here tonight. So that was all for information only. The next item has to do with capital appropriations. Staff provided copies of Section 5.08, lapse of appropriations from the municipal code, which refers to the 3-year extension of budgeted capital appropriations. It's been our past practice to begin the extension in the year after the year in which the appropriation was budgeted. In other words, if something is appropriated initially in 2008, the clock for the 3 years doesn't start running until 2009, and we had questioned that. We didn't take any formal action on that. We are waiting for some further information in the year-end report, and will give us some historical data for items spent in the 4th year of the appropriation. I believe that the Charter Commission was also going to talk about that. So that's for information only. The next item, we looked at some reports. Those were the 2010 interest and dividends report, 4th quarter investment activity, December 31st cash investment portfolio, and the December Rice Trust report. That was also for information. And finally, we looked at some future agenda items. Those will include such things as the local option sales tax, deferred and suspense assessments, the investment policy revision that was requested by Rice Hospital, OSHA, and some safety funding, Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership request, and the Western Collector budget. That was also for information. So we had a very informative meeting. If there's no questions, I would move to file the minutes.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to file the minutes of the Finance Committee meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries. That brings us to the Community Development Committee report for February 3rd. Councilman Dock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me add to Dennis's comment that we had a very informative meeting also, Dennis. Item number 1, no public comments. Item number 2, for information only, airport terminal, historic designation. Staff presented a brief status report on the appeal filed regarding the eligibility for historic designation of the former airport terminal. See attachment A. And I would add here, Mr. Mayor, that I would like for staff to complete the package that was online with some documents that did not make the website. I'd like those for the public to be able to review. The committee discussed the options available to the city based on the possible ruling that could come down from the keeper. It was noted by staff that the city has offered to keep the Rice hangar and the beacon, the RCO, as a part of any mitigation that may be required. Again, that was for information only. Item number 3, church demolition. Staff informed the committee that the demolition of the Mannheim Church has been delayed until at least February 13th. This is due to the demolition contractor having to work with the church on an amendment to the existing subordination agreement. It is expected that the demolition will be completed over a 2-day period. Staff will contact the Kandiyohi County Historical Society to make sure they have the opportunity to take photos before or during the demolition. And there was an excellent article in the paper today on that also. Item number 4, John Supper Club rehabilitation, for information only. The committee received an update on the rehabilitation efforts at John Supper Club building. Staff has seen evidence of no work since November 2010. The owners of the building have an agreement with the city to complete the renovation by July 1st, 2011. Staff will send a gentle reminder to the owners. Item 5, empty and vacant homes, for information only. The committee discussed the ongoing issue of vacant and unoccupied homes within the city. A cursory windshield survey yielded a tally of 99 vacant homes. It was noted that not all of these homes should be considered vacant or abandoned, as some may be for sale and not noted, and some may be owned by snowbirds and have just not been visited recently. Staff looked for signs of activity such as evidence in the snow or other signs of occupation. Staff told the committee that the list would be fine-tuned by obtaining utility records to find out which homes had activity accounts. Once that information is obtained, a more accurate list will be prepared. And again, this was for information only, but it was shared with the police department and the fire department. Item 6, Job Z, excuse me. Staff offered an update on the status of Job Z activity in the city of Willmar. It was noted that the Willmar job zones were subzones of a larger Southwest Minnesota zone that is administered by the Southwest Regional Development Commission in Slayton. The committee discussed the tax breaks that are available within Job Z zones, those being corporate income tax, real estate tax, sales tax, and other miscellaneous taxes paid by businesses. It was noted that a business has to qualify for Job Z benefits by stating and reaching employment and capital investment goals. At the state level, the program sunsets in December 31st, 2015. And item number 7 was miscellany. The committee discussed ongoing attempts by First Step Child Care to obtain tax-exempt status and to free themselves of paying real estate taxes. There has been ongoing contact with the business by the assessing office and other city departments with regard to this matter. Also, Councilmember Amon inquired about the timing for the construction of the Western Interceptor. The committee discussed various reasons for the timing of construction. Staff will provide a brief position paper regarding the construction timing from a land use and development perspective. This information will be available at our committee meeting on February 17th. There were no other items, Mr. Mayor, and so I would move to close this report.
Second. I have a motion and a second to file the minutes of the Community Development Committee report for February 3rd, 2011. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 13 on the agenda is to reschedule the second council meeting from February 21st to February 22nd because of the President's Day holiday. Is everyone aware of that?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
The motion is made and seconded to move the second council meeting in February from February 21st to the February 22nd because of the President's Day holiday. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. The motion carries. Announcement of council meeting, committee meeting dates. Public Works.
Tuesday, the 15th at 4:45.
And Labor Relations.
Wednesday, the 16th, 4:45.
And the Finance Committee.
Monday, Valentine's Day, the 14th, at 4:45.
Community Development.
Mr. Mayor, Community Development will meet the 17th in conference room number 1, 4:45.
4:45. Okay. And now we're to the miscellany. Kevin, would you explain to us what's going on with the work session scheduled for February 10th?
Mayor, members of the council, first off, we'd like to correct 15A to be the City Council Springstead Administrator work session. Might as well come for the right theme. You have before you a profile draft by the consultant. Should be in your pile of handouts. We would like to work on that, finish that. You can see in there's a salary recommendation. We'll probably work on interview questions and so forth. We need to find a consensus. We will be meeting Thursday, February 10th. I think it's originally set for 4:45, but she's wondering if we can meet at 4:30, if your schedules would allow that. She thinks she may need that extra 15 minutes before everybody gets ready to go. But if you can't, because of other commitments, we'll stay the course.
So the work session is scheduled for 4:30.
We'll repost it to 4:30 if you can make that deadline.
We can make it for the Springstead work session.
On Thursday, 2 days from now. 3 days from now.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
We got to get the heads nodding. Can we do it 4:30?
Works for me.
Might be a little bit tight, but I can probably squeeze it out. I don't
We'll try and make it work.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, what is it?
It's a radiator.
Here in line.
Look at Tommy gone.
I would also like to open up for discussion the transparency that we've been talking about all this time for the videotaping of the committee meetings. And what I have in mind, just to be clear on this, is to videotape just the committee meetings, not the subcommittee meetings, but like finance, parts of labor, those that are not closed, of course, the public works, and finance.
Community development.
Community development. If we can open that up for discussion at this time.
I can start, I guess.
Okay.
I'm going to go back quite a ways.
Okay.
And I don't remember what year we started. Do you know, Kevin, doing the council? I mean, that's a long...
92.
Was it 92? Okay. And prior to that, we did not have it aired. I really pushed for that. And it took, well, I'll bet it took at least 2 years of convincing to get the council to go along with it, the council at that time. And there was a lot of apprehensions on the part of the council to do that. And I did it because of the same transparency that you're talking about. Some of the apprehensions on part of the council members at that time was it's going to change the council meetings. And it's going to, well, it's going to change the council meetings. And I can honestly say it has changed the council meetings. I like the transparency. I really do. And I like the ability of the, and this was my argument at that time, I want the taxpayers to know what's going on. I can look at it today and say, it's changed the council meetings from what it used to be. and I still like the transparency. However, I'm not sold on the fact that we should be making a change for the committee meetings. You know, all the recommendations and everything that is developed in those committee meetings comes right here and is discussed and reviewed, and the public knows what's going on. I think that if we start televising the committee meetings, it's going to change those committee meetings. It's not that I'm trying to hide anything from anybody by any means. Like I said, I'm the one that pushed for televising in the first place. I think that the moving the meetings over here so that we can televise them, I think there's some, you know, when we've discussed even having facilities for council meetings, we've discussed being able to have facilities for council meetings that are attached. That's been some of our discussions, attached to offices so that they have access to their offices and materials. And I can understand that. I work for 7 different boards. And if we can have the board meetings right at our office, it's much more comfortable because you know you have the information that you need. And to have it over here, you aren't going to have that access or that ease of accessibility to whatever you might need. I think, like I said, you go through the committee process. All of the information that is utilized in most of the information, I'll say, is put on the website so people can take a look at it. And it comes in our packets. So I think there's there is a fair amount of transparency in our city government already. But I think that televising the committee meetings, again, is going to change those committee meetings.
And in what way would you say that it would change them?
Well, you know, there's things that change. All right, I'll give you a very small example of that. When we used to have informational meetings, like Mr. Anderson reported tonight, when the council used to come to items before it was televised, the council would be able to read what's in the packet. And when you came to something that was for information only, you'd say, and I'm going to turn to one of the, I'll just pick on the community development because I turned to it. You come to the airport terminal historic designation appeal. It would be said, that item's for information only. You have it in front of you, and you'd go on to the next one. Church demolition, that was for information only, and you moved on. You didn't have to read it all. And I think it's good that we read it all here, because then the public's able to see and hear. But I think you're going to change the complexion of those meetings. And that's just a small part of it.
So you don't see the same thing happening with the committee meetings as what has happened with the council meeting?
Yes, I do. And that's why I'm not in favor of televising the committee meetings. I think it's going to change the whole complexion of the committee meetings, some of the discussion. You know, yeah.
I should mention to you also that the committee meetings would not be televised live. They would be televised as there was time by RAC 8 to televise them. I don't know if that would make any difference to you or not in your feeling. Councilman Christensen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I spoke to Rudy Veal about this, and he, my take on it was they would not be live television. They would not be here. They would be videotaped over over in the conference room at the City Hall. He put them on a disc and run them back and put them on our website. And then he would have a slot for them on TV at whenever. So it isn't a live broadcast. It wouldn't have to take place here. That's what he explained to me.
That would not have to take place here.
Yeah, he said they would send the camera over to the guy and videotape it, bring it back to the Rack 8. I don't know, Kevin, maybe you have more information on that?
And maybe David could shake his head. I think it's inverted the other way. It would be one staff member for taped, 2 staff members for live. The 1 staff member would be here. It eliminates, though, putting subtitles under each speaker, whether it's Mayor and Yanish, whatever. We wouldn't have any of that. And he's shaking his head. So we'd have to be here with the staff member. But then we would stream it on our website. And that's almost like the next day. And Rudy would fill it in. You know, there's always those filler times. And so he would make that in there. But we weren't proposing going live. It doubles the staff time. It also conflicts with school board and other things that are going live.
Is there any other comments? Councilman Anderson?
Thank you. You know, I'm not hearing this, an outcry at all for doing this. Now, we did televise the budget meeting when the mayor presented his budget to the finance committee. And, you know, that's one of the sort of things that we should do. If I'm not sure why we would be proposing this, and we can say transparency, but I think that Councilmember Reese pretty well identified that we go through everything right here. I would suggest that if it's for a historical record, or we want to have some access to it at some point in time, if there was something said that somebody questions, then I would say go ahead and tape it over in conference room 1 and put it away. It seems to me, just in listening what I'm hearing here, that these are going to be broadcast at whatever time, whenever there's time available. People aren't going to necessarily know when they're even going to be on Rack 8. So I am against recording them and replaying them. I would say record them and store them, and if there's a need for it, then it's available. There's a historical record for it.
Councilman Dockman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'm absolutely in favor of doing it, and I've expressed that a number of times at our retreats. Dennis, I think the outcry for change that Doug talked about happened on November 2nd, 2010. The public wants us to do things differently. And the way that you get openness and transparency is that not everybody can get to conference room 1 or whatever conference room at 4:45. But they can choose to go to our city website and listen to something, especially knowing what the agenda items are, and if it affects them, why would we not want them to be able to listen to what staff and council members are saying? I mean, I just think it makes sense to do this. It's not that expensive, and I think it's a worthwhile thing to at least attempt it.
Any other discussion? Councilman Allen?
Has there been any information put together on this as far as the cost associated with it?
I think I can tell you this, is that, and maybe you can confirm it, Kevin, but as I understand, there would be no cost because everything is in place already. Am I right?
No, sir. Small correction. David likes to get paid back in the corner there.
Oh, do we have to pay again?
Yeah, he's been after me for money. I don't understand that. But so that would be, well, those meetings are as long as these meetings. So that's $300. So $600 quickly there, maybe, if we had all those. So multiply that out by 26.
every other week.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Thank you,
Christian?
thank you, Mr. Mayor. But isn't it true, Kevin, that that's not taxpayer dollars? I mean, RAC 8 runs off of fees collected.
Absolutely
I mean,
true.
They have their own budget, I mean, and they have an excess presently, and the council can actually tap that if they wanted to use elsewhere, because there is an excess there, there's a fund balance. So it isn't like the taxpayers are funding this, it would be RAC 8 funding it with their fees that they collect. They don't collect taxpayer dollars to operate their system.
Correct. They collect franchise fees from the viewers of both Intel and Charter.
Right. So
not taxes.
So we're not talking taxpayer dollars. It's a budget that's separate from, it's part of the city, but they have their own budget and they collect their own fees, franchise fees, like you said. And so the cost thing to me is it's not costing the taxpayers any money, and it's strictly from the franchise fee. So it isn't. What should I say? It isn't costly to the taxpayers, basically. I would agree with Doug here that things would change at meetings. There's no doubt about it. But there's also a flavor that you get in a meeting that isn't brought forth in the minutes. The minutes of our committee meetings are quite shortened, and they're to the points that are made. But you don't get arguments in there about why do we make decision A over decision B. It doesn't really say in the minutes. It says there was a motion made, seconded and passed for A. Well, what was B? Nobody knows, because it isn't put in our minutes that way. So there's an argument to let the public know and have a record of it, why we made such a decision. But again, I know that it would change. People get hesitant at meetings when they're being videotaped or even recorded. Maybe we should try recording them and putting them on our website, see how that works, or document it like Dennis said. That there is a hesitation for people to be themselves when they speak, and they're being recorded. We see it here. But I do like the openness. I definitely do.
Councilman Anderson, did you have something to add?
I was just going to talk about the cost to the taxpayers. I think, admittedly, there's a franchise fee that is collected, but as was also indicated, they have a surplus, and we have tapped that and used that money so the taxpayers didn't have to have a tax increase. And I suspect that we are going to be tapping that potentially in 2011. Pending what kind of outcome we get from the legislature. So if we didn't have funds there, then we would have to turn to other things or raise taxes. So I think there's the potential that there could be an impact to the taxpayers. And to me, it's not a money thing. It's not a money issue.
Would it be a softer approach to take if we said we'd put this on a 60-day trial basis to see what kind of feedback we got from the public? Councilman Ahman?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to know what the public thinks. I think the idea is good, and what Mr. Dokken has been pushing for ever since I came on the council. He's been saying transparency, openness, and I agree with that. We should be, and I think we are. This is something we can talk about at the retreat too. But I feel that when I look back at how things, Councilman Reese talked about how we started RAC 8 or how it got started and how it was moved that we started taping, and I remember the conversations of whether or not we should tape the council minute meetings, and there are some people that were adamantly opposed to it. I also heard that there were people from the public that were intimidated by being on camera. For that reason, not for my own personal use or sake, I could care less either one way or another, but for the sake of the public, I want them, and I think there is an intimidation factor, that people come up and they're intimidated by people who are elected. And I want to hopefully not by me or by anybody else here, but they have that perception. And I think having a camera on them would kind of either show some people who are very, very open and very, very vocal to abuse the situation. And I think the people that were quieter, more reserved, would be reluctant to come there and speak openly due to it being televised. Again, I'm not, if anybody wants anything, and I've told this to many people, many constituents, from when I left office in '94 to what the council, many of you here included, have done, and staff, is about as open as it can get. I have seen nothing but great strides, and I want to commend you people on doing that. I don't see any real urgency to do this. And also I'm looking at the money issue because, as Dennis mentioned, the LGA cuts and what we're going to be doing there, but you look at $15,000, that could easily go up, because then what else is it going to be? You still have to video, edit, tape, record it, staff time. So money is always an issue, but I just wanted to be open about it and let you know that I'm not sold on the idea, Jim. I appreciate your good truth in government and your openness, but I don't necessarily agree with you on this one. And I think I've expressed that to you before. I'm a little hesitant to just dive right into this. Thank you.
Any other discussion? And I ask to the council, how shall we leave it?
Another hand up.
I'm sorry, Councilman Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, maybe it should be up to the individual committees too, but I suggest that we take this up on a retreat and have a, couple-hour discussion on it, if nothing else, and then settle it right there. It won't be on TV, but we'll be able to discuss it. But I suggest we do it at our retreat. I think that's a good place for it, and between now and then, we'll probably hear some comments from the public. I hope we do. If you have strong feelings about it, call City Hall and let them know, or call us council people and tell us what direction you'd like to go.
Look into the camera when you say that, Ron. Okay, shall we leave it at that?
Retreat.
We'll do it at the we see a lot of nods
to the retreat.
Okay. That being said, we move into, you may or may not be aware of the fact that we had an incident at the railroad here this past week. And I just want to say to the Chief Calvin and public and the private people that got involved, how proud I am of the way that they reacted to this situation. I'd like to, if I may, call on Chief Calvin to talk a little bit about it and tell us what he can. But I am just really, sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, very proud of you and your men and everybody that worked together on this. Men and women, I should say.
Mayor Yanish, thank you for the opportunity to brag on our guys a little bit. First off, I want to thank the firefighters for their diligent work on this particular rescue situation. As most of you are aware, the fire department does not regularly respond on rescue calls. That's handled by the Canada County Rescue Squad. And so our guys, in my opinion, and gals went above and beyond what is a normal call of duty for them. And I'm grateful for their service. At the same time, I want to commend Willmar Ambulance Service for their excellent job, Rice Hospital for the work that they did in actually bringing a surgical team out to the rail yard. What happened is an individual fell under a rail car and was trapped under that car. And then the rescue crews were able to disentangle him from that, and then he was transported to a hospital by air ambulance. People from the rescue squad, the ambulance, the police department, State Patrol, and then we had the private businesses get involved in this particular rescue as well. That's something that doesn't normally happen on these type of situations. Generally, the public people take care of it. But in this particular case, we had to call on the resources of our privates. And this is an example of excellent private and public partnering together to solve a problem that isn't seen very often. And we used a unified command system, and what a unified command system is that there's no one person in charge, but a group of people that make decisions, and the private partners were involved in that as well. And so special thanks go out to Tyne Building Movers, Marcus Building Movers, Chapel Central, and then again the municipal utilities, Willmar Ambulance, State Patrol, Willmar Police Department, Kennewick County Rescue Squad, and then also the Willmar Fire Department for our efforts in that particular rescue. So the outcome was as favorable as it could be in this type of a dramatic rescue. We have had contacts statewide and nationwide in regards to this particular situation, and we're getting requests today from outside agencies to share our story on how we made that rescue. So I've been in contact with the ambulance director about that. So thank you for your kind words, and I will pass those on to our people.
Please do.
And we do have a review of the incident that's going to be happening within the next week or so, and I'll share your kind words at that as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And thank you again, and congratulations to everyone that was involved in this. And I think it's appropriate to give them a great hand. Thank you again, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second. I would like to be excused from the February 22nd meeting.
So be it. Now, do we have a motion to be adjourned?
Yeah, you do.
Okay. And a second?
Second.
We are adjourned.